If you think Visa makes money from credit cards, you're analyzing the wrong business. The plastic card in your wallet is the most visible part of the system, but visibility is not the same as leverage. Every day, trillions of dollars move through a financial network most people never see. Banks issue the cards and merchants accept the payments, but something else quietly sits in the middle of nearly every transaction. That hidden layer is what makes the entire system possible. Once you understand that layer, Visa's business model begins to look very different. So the real question is not who prints the card. The real question is who controls the network the card connects to. In financial systems, the infrastructure often matters far more than the product itself. To understand how that system formed, you have to go back to the late 1950s when banks began experimenting with consumer credit cards. The idea seemed simple. Give customers a card, allow them to buy things without cash, and collect payment later. But the early versions of that system revealed a major constraint. A credit card issued by one bank was useless at a store that didn't recognize it. Merchants did not want to manage dozens of incompatible payment programs, and banks could not scale their cards without merchant acceptance. The entire system needed a shared infrastructure connecting both sides. The solution became a shared payment network. Instead of each bank building its own isolated program, banks could issue cards connected to the same infrastructure. That infrastructure eventually evolved into what we now know as Visa. At first glance, Visa appears to be a credit card company. But that interpretation misses something fundamental about how the system actually works. Visa does not lend money, issue credit, or collect interest from consumers. Banks provide the credit, and merchants sell the goods. Visa operates the network connecting the two sides, and this is the moment the business model flips. Cards move money between people, but networks move the system itself. The visible business is a piece of plastic. The hidden advantage is the infrastructure processing transactions across the entire economy. Today, millions of merchants accept Visa payments, and thousands of banks issue Visa cards to their customers. Every time one of those cards is used, the transaction travels through Visa's global infrastructure before the payment is completed. What happens when a single company becomes the switchboard for global commerce? The scale becomes enormous. Visa processes more than 200 billion transactions every year across its network. The company operates in more than 200 countries and territories, connecting consumers, merchants, and financial institutions. Yet despite sitting at the center of global payments, Visa does something unusual compared with traditional financial institutions. It takes almost no credit risk. When you swipe your card at a store, your bank provides the credit and absorbs the loss if the customer fails to repay the balance. Visa simply processes the transaction through its infrastructure. So how does Visa actually make money? The answer is surprisingly simple. Visa collects a tiny fee every time money moves across its network. These fees are usually fractions of a percent, small enough that consumers rarely notice them and merchants treat them as a routine cost of accepting digital payments. But what happens when that tiny fee applies to trillions of dollars moving across the global economy? Even a fraction of a percent becomes extremely powerful at scale. Visa generates more than $30 billion in annual revenue and operates with profit margins that are unusually high for a financial company. Because the company does not lend money or absorb credit losses, the business model avoids many of the risks faced by traditional banks. Another factor that strengthens Visa's position is the reliability of the infrastructure itself. Payment networks must operate continuously with near-perfect accuracy because even brief disruptions can affect millions of transactions across stores, banks, and digital platforms around the world. Visa has spent decades building systems capable of processing enormous volumes of payments with extremely low failure rates. During peak shopping periods, the network can handle tens of thousands of transactions per second, while maintaining strict security and verification standards. That reliability creates another barrier to competition. Any new payment network would not only need banks and merchants to adopt it, but it would also need to prove it can operate at the same global scale without interruptions. Financial institutions are naturally cautious when adopting infrastructure that moves money. Even small reliability concerns can prevent banks or merchants from switching to an unproven system. So over time, Visa's infrastructure becomes more than just a payment processor. It becomes trusted financial plumbing that the global economy depends on every day. But transaction volume alone does not explain the strength of the system. The real power comes from something more powerful than scale alone. And this is where the system becomes difficult to escape. The real power comes from network effects. For a merchant, refusing Visa means turning away customers who expect their cards to work everywhere. Few businesses are willing to lose sales simply to avoid a payment network fee. Banks face the same incentives. If consumers want cards that work at millions of merchants around the world, that gives banks a strong reason to issue cards connected to the largest network. This creates a powerful dependency loop. Merchants depend on Visa because customers carry the cards. Banks depend on Visa because merchants accept the network. Over time, the infrastructure becomes essential to the entire payment ecosystem. But here is where the system becomes even more interesting. The more merchants accept Visa, the more valuable the card becomes for consumers. The more consumers carry Visa cards, the more important it becomes for merchants to accept them. So what happens when both sides of a marketplace depend on the same payment network? Replacing it becomes extraordinarily difficult. A new payment system cannot simply launch and compete overnight. It would need banks to issue cards, merchants to accept payments, and consumers to trust the system at the same time. Without merchants, consumers cannot use the card. Without consumers, merchants have no reason to accept it. That interdependence creates one of the strongest economic defenses in modern finance. Pause and consider that for a moment. Most people think Visa sells credit cards, but in reality, Visa operates one of the most important financial networks in the modern economy. And once a network reaches global scale, something interesting begins to happen. Growth compounds. If more merchants accept Visa, consumer convenience increases. If convenience increases, more consumers choose Visa cards. If more consumers use Visa cards, transaction volume grows. And if transaction volume grows, the small fee Visa collects on each payment compounds into enormous revenue. That escalation ladder explains how the business scales. Visa does not need to sell products or issue loans. It simply operates the infrastructure connecting buyers and sellers across the global economy. So the next time you tap your card at a checkout terminal, it may feel like a simple payment. But behind that moment sits a global financial network designed to move money instantly across the planet. Most people analyze the card they hold in their hand. Sophisticated observers analyze the network that card connects to. Because in modern economies, the companies with the most power are rarely the ones selling the product. They are the ones controlling the system the product depends on. And that is why Visa's real business was never the card. It was the network behind it.